Cape Cod is an inspiration for innovation. eSTEAMers will introduce you to the often overlooked entrepreneurs building Cape Cod's future with STEAM. Join us on the journey as we introduce you to the makers and innovators, educators and artists creating the new economy on the sandbar. I'm Paula, and this is eSTEAMers. Today we have a special guest with us, Dan Gallagher from Open Cape. You are the recycled Executive Director. We kind of like that kind of stuff here on eSTEAMers. You're back for the second phase, but Open Cape really literally started many years ago. And why don't you give us a little history, Dan?
Sure. In 2006, I was the technology director for Cape Cod Community College. The college was undergoing a major development of its network and computer infrastructure at that time. And the biggest obstacle to providing the services to the college that we needed was the inability to get high-speed bandwidth internet service to the college. I went out to the traditional providers that are here, right, and asked for fiber optics at our campus, and all of them gave me a big no. Yeah. But this was a major critical issue for the college's future delivery, right, of services. And so I met with some other folks, particularly Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution IT Director is Art Gaylord, yeah, and he had a similar problem. And so we initially started out thinking, we'll just put a microwave connection from the college to Woods Hole over to the mainland in Dartmouth, and then we'd be on our way. But then we had some other people who came involved. Gary Delius from the Outer Cape, Teresa Martin was another one. And we asked anybody who thinks this is a problem for their business or entity here on the Cape to come to Cape Cod Community College to talk about it, and 100 people showed up. So wow, this isn't just our problem, it's a lot of folks who have a problem with, yeah, this, right? So we said this is a bigger issue, we should try to resolve it in a bigger way for more people. So we started down the road of trying to resolve this ourselves because we couldn't get the answer from the traditional providers. Largely they had monopolies here on, yep, the Cape that allowed them to collect cash without improving plant. Mm-hmm. So we got a $50,000 grant from the Cape Cod Commission. This is your license plate money. Exactly, yeah. Which is intended to do this sort of thing, to feed, you know, ideas and things that might grow into something more substantial. We followed that on with another grant for $150,000 from the Mass Technology Collaborative. Ultimately got a $5 million grant from the state and $32 million from the federal government and another $2 million in private investment. Wow. For a total of $40 million in 2010. That allowed us to build what was then a 350-mile fiber optic network with a microwave backup specifically designed to ensure communications, particularly on the Outer Cape, which is vulnerable to severe storms, mm-hmm, and a data center, a modern co-location data center in the Barnstable government complex. And we constructed that. It was all completed in late 2012, has been operating flawlessly for 2 years now. So when we talk about 350 miles, a lot of people, I think, on Cape Cod don't realize that we didn't have any redundancy, for one thing, of our internet connections or our communication systems. 350 miles encompasses more than just the Cape. Yeah. How does that work? I have seen a map where the pipe runs down one part of the Cape and then comes up another part of the Cape, mm-hmm, meets in Orleans. Yep. So we chose to, cover as much territory on the Cape as we could, but in order to create the redundancy and reliability, automated alternate path selection by the network, right, you have to build rings physically and virtually that will allow all of those things to happen, which ends up being the very high reliability of our network. Right. So you'll see we go across the Canal Road, we cross both bridges, we go up 132, we come across up at 28 by Chatham, but also down 6A. So all of this creates loops and things. And on the Outer Cape, because it doesn't, the geographic nature, right, of it, it terminates in Provincetown as a leg, but then we back that up with a microwave connection that comes back to create that loop of reliability. Great. And the things that are off Cape were intended largely because, I mean, we could run fiber optics all over Cape Cod if we wanted, right, to, but if we can't get to the broader internet, what good does it do us?
Right.
So we initially chose a path to Providence, Rhode Island. It runs down Route 6, basically, along the south coast, to Providence, Rhode Island, where we connect to a company called Level 3, which is a major tier 1 provider to the internet. And through other agreements and arrangements, we go to Brockton and then on to Boston now, to 1 Summer Street in Boston, which is really the hub of New England for all major internet traffic.
Oh, really? Excellent.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. So we've got all this broadband now, and we have seen some of our schools connect, some of our libraries connected, some of our towns connected. What does that do for folks that connect to this network? I mean, why not just go with Comcast on a business class? Why do these entities, these institutions need all of this bandwidth?
So we had several major goals that we wanted to achieve and have achieved, frankly. One was to create the infrastructure that can allow high data users to have the type of resource they need to be competitive in the real world. I'll give you a couple specific examples.
Great.
Joint Base Cape Cod, always on the list of base closures, right? Always a threat, and but yet a major engine within our economy here on the Cape. What they do there on the base now in particular requires a very high speed, very secure connection to the broader Department of Defense. They were unable to get that. It was part of the reason they're always on the list and makes them very vulnerable, particularly with their current mission.
Right.
And we were able to solve that. They were our first customer. Problem solved. Others, like the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, pushes huge amounts of data back and forth to its scientific research folks all over the world, really.
Yeah.
And they needed to have this very fast, very reliable connectivity in order to, again, compete. There's another very large institution in California called the Scripps Institute, which wouldn't mind taking research dollars from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and taking it to California. We couldn't have these vulnerabilities to these major economic entities. Hydroid, a private company being very successful over in Falmouth, also a customer now of our network. They require this kind of very high data bandwidth, but very high reliability that our network provides. So we wanted to give that infrastructure to those kinds of institutions that require it. That was one of our major goals. We did that. The other one was make a competitive marketplace where pricing could be realistic. I'll give you the Cape Cod Community College example on this. When I worked at Cape Cod Community College in 2006, we had 4.5 megabits per second. That's a DSL connection, basically, today. $45,000 a year we were paying.
Yeah, and you can't even get Facebook on that connection.
You can't do anything, right? So, and whereas they needed hundreds of megabits per second for connectivity. Today, they have multiple providers coming there and offering them service at less than they were paying for the 4.5 megabytes, hundreds of times more capacity than they had before, right? A competitive marketplace has been created. That was a critical nature of that. Another major goal was, can we connect all of the towns and schools into a common network where, without using internet access, largely in a private network, they could share in common applications and aggregated services. So the county commission largely took the effort on this to secure a contract with CapeNet, who's our operating partner who actually operates the network on our behalf. We own the network. And with that, all of the towns are connected to our private network that operates at a gigabit per second. So you find now that the county in our data center in the complex has a very robust server farm there, really. And they're doing backup services for one town. There's an e-permitting application now that's being shared by towns. They can aggregate a lot of these services. So I think they've now currently run 130 different servers there, providing services to other towns that the town might not have been able to operate on its own, doesn't have the technical infrastructure, personnel, and it's very, very reliable in a facility that's designed to be, very secure and stable and power and all the rest of it. So those were some of our major goals. The other one was the libraries. The CLAMS library network that everybody uses also uses our network and has their servers now in our data center.
And they've been much more stable since.
Absolutely. I think if you went and talked with them, you would get, from both the county and from them, that this is really working well for them. And so we see just future growth in that. As I've mentioned to you before, I think that every municipal phone on the Cape should be an IP-based phone running through our network and over to the data center. Towns could save 30 to 50% on their phone bills. This is a no-brainer. Everyone wins, right? And it's possible. But beyond that, there's other possibilities for us to think of and create more options for collaboration, shared applications, aggregated services for everyone's benefits. The towns save money, citizens get better services, those kinds of things are really possible. One other major goal we had was the Outer Cape for this infrastructure, because just when in 2006, in fact, I think it might have been 2005, there was, I think, a telephone pole knocked down by a car accident in New Orleans Rotary. All communications on the Outer Cape were lost.
Correct, yes.
Including 911.
I remember that.
And afterwards, those towns went to the providers and said, you need to create a backup for this. And they said, no, we don't, and no, we won't. And they said, what are we going to do? And so we created a very robust, with a microwave backup system that ensures that there's reliable communications out there. And so the way that we've designed we were trying to address these broader issues. I think there was sometimes folks caught on to an idea that we would provide free Wi-Fi throughout the Cape. That was never the case. I tried my best to tamp that down. But it was these broader economic issues, even energy. One of the big economic negatives for the Cape is reliable power. Well, we provided to NSTAR in an agreement strands of our fiber optics throughout Cape Cod for them to create a smart grid system that automatically reroutes power in a failure event. So that instead of having 6,000 homes without power, you might have 1,000. So those are the kinds of things that we were trying to solve, the very macro issues. And that backbone, that core base of infrastructure is now in place. Operating very well, has hundreds of libraries, schools on board and operating as customers. But I've come back now, it's time to transition to a new phase. What's the next 10 years?
The new phase, what's the next 10 years? We just recently read in the paper this past week that our cell phone service is going to get better, but not the cell phone service, it's the backhaul. Most people don't understand that they can make their connection to the cell tower just fine, but once they start to do things, they need to get off that tower that needs to go to an internet connection at that point. So there's been a major announcement that you're going to be creating or working with one of the major cell phone providers to alleviate that dreaded dropped call or I've got no service kind of piece. So tell us a little bit about that, Dan.
Well, and again, this goes back to our original 2006 conference at the college. In a mobility society where everyone has a smartphone, an iPad, and increasingly we know, smartwatches, it's only going to get more prolific.
I have all three.
I'm
part of the problem.
And your home is going to have more and more of these kinds of devices.
The automation,
And so all this becomes a critical component to our mobility within our society, which is critical to businesses as well. If you can't reliably run your business with your phones working properly, it's an issue. And we know we had the infamous drop call is a big problem on the Cape. It's not because you're not connected to the cell towers, because the copper wire that goes to that cell tower cannot carry all of those calls off the Cape. So one of our major goals was to resolve that problem. And so we do have an agreement with a major carrier who does not want to be identified just yet. They'll make their own announcements when the time comes, to bring fiber optics from our network to 59 cell towers. 51 of them are on the Cape, and 8 of them are on in Plymouth in that area. So that's going to go a long way, not only to resolving this issue in the current technology that exists, but as we know, there was 2G, there was 3G, there was 4G, there's going to be 5G coming. 5G is even more bandwidth intensive than the 4G is. And if you don't have our type of fiber optics at a cell tower, it will not be able to transition to 5G.
Interesting.
So this is a critical thing that this will provide. And even though the contract is with one provider, once our fiber is in place, we can service multiple providers. So it won't be you need to be with this company necessarily.
But you're also talking that by putting in these laterals, and for folks that are not really familiar with the technology, these are basically drops that you're going to go and create 51 of these on the Cape. Now these are going to be closer to businesses as well, so you're going to expand the footprint of Open Cape beyond that 350 miles?
Yes, and so our major effort in the next 10 years will be expanding that footprint. We need to cover more territory in order to bring on more customers, reach more people, So every time we build a lateral, and this, again, think of our backbone as the 28/6A, highway of our system, but it has a 132. But you need to reach further into these side roads and feeder roads, right? And or think of your plumbing. You know, you've got a water main that comes in the house and you have faucets all over the house. Well, we're working on the faucets in the next 10 years.
Great analogy.
And every time that we get an opportunity to expand laterals, we don't think of it as just go from point A to point B. We think, what's between point A and point B? And can we reach someone else? Could we even modify the path slightly to pick up more? And absorb that cost, because it will bring on another 3 or 4 potential customers. So every time a contract like this comes along, we say this is a great opportunity to expand the footprint. And in this case with these laterals, it's about 35 more miles of laterals. But what additional opportunities does that create to reach more businesses, more institutions, and even multi-dwelling units?
Right. So I think, you know, that 10 years as you look to expand more opportunities, part of this is a lot of folks don't understand the moniker dark fiber opposed to, or last mile and middle mile. This is a middle mile network, but what it's mandated is that it can basically sell fiber to anybody.
Yes. It's an open access network, so we can sell to, CapeNet is our provider, basically. They maintain the network, they operate the network. But even within their contract, it clearly states that OpenCape can sell dark fiber to any companies, even competitors potentially of theirs.
Okay.
Because we were never interested in just becoming another monopoly.
Right.
Our function as a nonprofit 501c3 corporation is to advance the interests of our community. This is what makes us unique. We use a private company to sell and build services, right, and maintain the network, but we're trying to advance the interests of the community, thus all those 10 goals that we had for the broader network. But now we want to expand that and get out into other areas and advance, again, further the interests of the community.
So what does this do for economic development, Dan? I mean, you know, people look at this and say, yeah, it's great that the institutions in Woods Hole can have more bandwidth and that our towns have more bandwidth and maybe we see some cost savings as citizens. But for economic development, what does Open Cape do for economic development here on the Cape?
It creates the opportunity, well, one, it stabilizes all those existing institutions, so it creates the opportunity for them to deliver their services more appropriately. But it also creates the opportunity for us to attract or help those who here develop new businesses really dependent on technology, which so many are now. I mean, we all know we do our bills online, banks need this, also hospitals, healthcare in a big way, and I can talk a little bit more about that as one of our directions. But it's essential in the current economy, and more so as we go forward, that any region that's going to survive economically must have this kind of connectivity in order to advance their interests as a business. And this goes all the way from a Woods Hole or a Joint Base Cape Cod to the economy that we have largely of hospitality, right?
Sure.
People are not going to come and stay at your hotel if you can't provide them with Wi-Fi access that really works. That you don't just put a sign up and says, we have Wi-Fi here for free, and then it doesn't work. You need to have, and the more mobile devices that you have, a family arrives with their 2 kids, they have 4 phones, they have 2 iPads, a laptop to do work. All of those devices are coming in and automatically connecting at your hotel or whatever other institution you might be at, and they are going to insist on their vacations to have that connectivity. And so from all the way from that, or the fisherman, you know, frankly comes in, needs to report what his catch is, all those, every part of our economy is affected by this, and increasingly so as we go forward. So we need to have the infrastructure that can support that in a big way.
Right, and as you said, you know, some of these plans include healthcare, and I mean, the healthcare piece of this is the telemedicine, especially for Cape with an aging demographic, is huge. Being able to pass that data off to Boston rather than making the trip to Boston every day.
Well, and I'll give you 3 examples of this. So we've just recently applied with a group of healthcare type providers for a grant called a MIHI. It's part of the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative Healthcare Initiative for medical records and more communication on the care path between your hospitalization all the way to going home with a visiting nurse. There's a continuum of care there where information needs to be transferred and tracked to see what your status is, because increasingly the hospitals will not get reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid in the future if a person who was in your care left and returned to an emergency room because of an infection or whatever it might be. So everybody's very interested in this continuation of care. So we've just applied for a grant to help beyond the hospital, the nursing home, the visiting nurses type folks, to help them to come on board with these kinds of records. The other one we're working on is a healthcare pilot that we seek to have two examples, actually. One on the Cape for a suburban and rural type example. The other one is probably going to be Brockton as an urban setting. How can you keep people in their homes longer? Now, this is where we're unique compared to other providers.
Right.
The interests of the community are what we're trying to forward, right? So we see great value in people being able to stay in their homes longer, right? We think our network, and really in large part our convening power, that we can pull disparate groups together from healthcare and technology to say, how do we keep a person in their home longer? And everyone wins. The person's at home, the state isn't paying, especially if it's a Medicare or Medicaid patient, $150,000 a year for them to stay in a nursing home. And that's done through, frankly, monitoring devices that we can place in their homes. It can be
video.
Well, it can be motion detectors with video. That's, again, it will be all desire.
Yeah.
What does the client need and desire? But a sensor in your bed when you're in or out of your bed, in your chair, toilet monitors, literally.
Right.
So things as simple as you got up from bed, went to the bathroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, did not return to the bed within a set time,
Right.
alarm goes off. But it also is more extensive than that. It's algorithmic, so it can sense this person's normal pattern of behavior is X. A deviation is occurring over the past 2 weeks. Someone should inquire about this.
Right.
Or if you're a diabetic, this is probably a big part of the Brockton one, where
Right.
they have a large population that's already being monitored in some programs.
Yeah.
Well, we have Bluetooth blood testers. Automatically will connect to the network, send that report. If they don't test the blood, an alarm is sent, someone calls, did you do your blood test today?
There you go.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge opportunities. And then the other one's a little bit further out. I had a conversation with a company that's interested in, you know, we have Google cars that drive themselves.
Yeah.
Well, in between that is the remote car. And
Okay.
folks on Cape who want to remain independent and stay in their homes want to drive. But this becomes an issue the older you get. But they really go to 4 or 5 destinations. They go to church, they go to the pharmacy, that sort of thing.
And Dunkin' Donuts.
And Wimpy's for a dinner or someplace they like, right?
Right.
Well, the car could be taken over and driven remotely in the future. So they could have their car, it's at their garage, and when they go out, they still go where they want to, but if they need assistance, it can be provided. I mean, these are things that are going to happen, and our network will be the enabling infrastructure for all that.
That is amazing and fascinating, Dan, that, you know, just putting what we call the pipe, a really, really big pipe here on Cape Cod can solve or at least mitigate some of the challenges that the Cape faces as the growth changes. You know, we're in a dearth of young professionals, but some of those young professionals are coming back, so they're going to want neighborhoods that want high speed. So I would imagine that that's probably in your plan, is to try to make some city centers and some growth incentive zones that have these high-speed areas.
Absolutely. I mean, a couple of things on that related to economic development. One of my pet ideas that we, you know, will start to now in this new phase work on is, I cannot understand why we are still sending. I think it's 15,000 people leave the Cape to work somewhere else, and a lot of them go to Boston.
Right.
To go to a cubicle to work on a computer for State Street Bank or someone else, right? There's no reason in the world why that needs to happen. We need to stop trying to expand the roads, accommodate the mass transit to move more people from anywhere in Massachusetts to Boston to go to a cubicle to work on a computer.
Right.
We can have remote offices now because with our bandwidth, and again, we're connected to 1 Summer Street in Boston where all those companies are connected, we can have super HD, you know, in every office. You could knock on the screen literally, and the person can either accept or deny. You know, just like they knocked on your office door, I'm coming in. You know, I mean, this is possible, and it's got to be more of our focus. Is how do we stop commuting and live more in our communities rather than a 2-hour commute of unknown length, really, and think about all day the dread of coming home when you could be home with your family, involved in your community. This is where we need to go. So that's a big one that I think we need to focus on, those kinds of ideas. And the other one is ultimately the fiber community. The Cape is about villages. My wife and I, as you know, my wife and I go to Florida. We drive all over the country seeing different areas. And I said this year coming back, I said, you know, it seems to me that everywhere is anywhere and anywhere is everywhere. It's the same thing. It's Home Depot, Lowe's,
Yep.
CVS, and the only places we want to go are where that is not the case. And so we go to Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, and places like that.
Yeah.
These beautiful communities. And Cape Cod still retains that. We've
We
been
do,
able
yep.
to maintain that. And we've got this, you know, there's a culture of, and a lot of folks who support that. We need to build around villages. And,
Right.
and we believe the same way. Ultimately, and this is all about capital for us, how do we raise the capital dues? We will deliver fiber to every, but not just another, you know, connection.
Right.
A community-based fiber to the village that not only delivers a fiber connection to your home, but with that has a Wi-Fi connection that is shared by all community members, micro cellular to fill in those blank spots of the cell service, your utility meters, smart meters in your home, all running over, again, with a community perspective to say, we're going to change this, and everyone's going to be connected at a gigabit speed, and we need to do the first example of that and prove this, that we can do it and do it right, and learn lessons, frankly.
Well, I nominate Marston's Mills.
But these are the things that we're talking about now are the
Right.
things we're thinking about for the next 10 years. How do we get there? How do we raise the capital? There's multiple pathways to that. And how do we then ensure that in every investment that we make, we're reaching out and spreading the network as much as we possibly can? That's the next 10 years for us.
It sounds really exciting, and I know that you're retired, Dan, so you are in a search now for an executive director for Open Cape.
Yes.
You know, thanks for coming back and spearheading this second phase, because it's so important to the Cape and so important to the citizens here, you know, for our growth. As you know, we want to retain some young professionals. We want to, you know, be a world-class destination, but also a world-class place to work, live, create, and play.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm Paula Hersey, and this is eSTEAMers. Welcome to eSTEAMers. We're back with Bert Jackson from the Cape Cod Technology Council. The Tech Council has been around on the Cape, let's see here, since 1996. Welcome, Bert. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me,
You
Paula.
haven't been with them that long, have you?
Actually, I was one of the founding members, and then we stepped away for a while, like a decade, and then I got re-involved again.
And you're president?
I am president again. Yes, this is my second non-consecutive term. I'm the Grover Cleveland of the Tech Council.
Excellent. A lot of folks don't even know that the Cape Cod Technology Council obviously has been around for a very long time, but even what they do. Can you give us like a brief synopsis of what the Tech Council does as an organization?
Sure. Our mission is to promote technology, education, entrepreneurship, and inclusion here on the Cape. We're essentially the region's technology advocacy organization. And some of the programs that we have that help with that, first we have our First Friday series on the first reasonable Friday of every month. We have a breakfast meeting usually at the Hyannis Golf Course. It's open to the public. There's a small fee for a wonderful breakfast and usually a great speaker. Well, it's always a great speaker, of course. We've got some wonderful speakers coming up. In September, we've got, which we usually do in September, is a piece around thinking globally and investing locally. So
that's great.
Should be some really good financial information about investing in local technology.
Okay.
And in October, we're very excited about this. We're going to have our First Friday down at the Marine Biological Laboratories.
Ooh.
You may be aware that the 6th Annual Oyster Symposium is happening here on Cape Cod. It's an international symposium. The first 5 have all been in the Asia Pacific Rim area. This is the first one not only in the United States, and it's going to be right here on the Cape. And the Oyster Symposium covers the gamut of oysters, everything from the use of oysters, the importance of oyster reefs, how to keep oyster production sustainable, all the way to the different ways you can prepare them and enjoy them.
That's really exciting, being one, up at NBL, absolutely gorgeous campus up there.
Yes.
And two, you know, the speaker that's going to be there is part of the symposium, I
That's
understand.
correct, that's correct.
You know, we're going to
Yes,
get
we'll have a real tie-in with that.
a real world-class
Yes.
event for that first Friday.
Right.
You also have a infrastructure committee, and from what I understand, this is open again to the public.
Yes.
And you do a lot of different work and are somewhat of a think tank for things that are happening on Cape Cod.
Sure. The Infrastructure Committee is chaired by Gene Curry, and it has been around since very early on in the Tech Council. It happens on the second Wednesday of every month at Gene Curry's office at the Barnstable House in Barnstable. And we cover a broad range of topics. For example, this morning we had the Cape Light Compact in, talking not only about the programs that the Cape Light Compact has for energy reduction for Cape Cod residents, which is free, the analysis is free, but also we were looking at the upcoming grid modification plans that Eversource is going to need to present to the Department of Public Utilities, and what the expectations are for that presentation by Eversource.
Or NSource, as we're calling them.
NSource. And the Cape Light Compact is going to be commenting on that, and then we are going to, as part of that process, be making some reviews and commenting on that as well. So that's one of the purposes of the Infrastructure Committee, is to look at some of the infrastructure issues here, whether it's electricity, power grid infrastructure. We've been working with the Cape Cod Commission on the wastewater issue, and we've made some public comments on that. We've certainly been very involved with broadband connectivity, going back to the late 90s in the Cape Cod Connect project.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
To the development of Open Cape and some of that broadband capacity that's here.
That's great. I think a part of what most people don't understand is that the Tech Council is also an advocate for technology companies and technology workers. Wasn't there the tech tax a few years ago? That the Technology Council was really right there in the forefront trying to get that reversed, which
certainly
it did get reversed.
It did, and actually that came through the Infrastructure Committee, was where we first heard about that. And the technology tax was a tax on computer services, and it was very vague. It passed sort of under the radar. The governor signed it, and then all of a sudden, all of us who are in technology or production using technology, do we tax our clients or not? It was, and you and I were both involved in that,
Exactly,
on the front lines. Every week, the Department of Revenue was issuing a new TIA. Well, this is how you interpret it. No, this is how you interpret it. So we were one of the first organizations to raise the red flag on this. We partnered with some off-Cape organizations, and eventually the tax was repealed.
Yeah, that was a great win for technology companies, workers,
Yes.
as well as the
Right.
average folks that use technology.
Sure.
Because it was, again, really so vague.
Right.
The Tech Council is going to be 20 years old.
How is that possible?
I don't know, but that anniversary is coming up in 2016.
Yes.
What do you see in the future here for entrepreneurship and technology in the next 20 years, Bert?
I'm really excited about it. One of the terms that you're going to hear a lot from the Tech Council, from the Chamber of Commerce, and our other Smarter Cape partners, which we can get into in a minute, is the blue economy. And we already have a basis for a blue economy here. And what is the blue economy? It is everything having to do with water, which is developing technology for managing wastewater, developing technology for dealing with other kinds of water pollution and water quality issues, dealing with ocean technology. We've got Hydroid and Bentos, who are, Hydroid makes these robots that, go underwater and do analysis for research and for the military. There's all kinds of possibilities around water that are going to be critical for the world in the next 20 years, especially as climate change happens. Our speaker for the annual meeting, Dr. Hannigan, who is the Dean of the Environment at UMass Boston, actually gave a complete presentation on economic opportunity around climate change. So here we are, an exposed peninsula sitting out in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
We're probably the ones who are going to be impacted first for any kind of changes that are happening. Why shouldn't we be the ones who are on the forefront? We've got wonderful research organizations in Woods Hole, both WHOI, MBL, and some of the smaller groups. Why shouldn't we be leveraging that and be the thought leader in the world for water technology?
That's amazing. You did touch on Smarter Cape, which I was going to ask about. The Tech Council has been a collaborative organization.
Yes.
Now, technology workers have not always been collaborative. I remember starting in the industry almost 18 years ago, and not being able to ask somebody for their code because it was all mine. But the Tech Council has always embraced collaboration. Tell us a little bit about the collaborative efforts that you've got with other organizations.
Sure. Well, in 2010, we were having some meetings in the infrastructure committee around Open Cape, and Open Cape was an idea. They'd received the funding to build it, but no fiber had been laid at this point. And one of the challenges that they had was, how do we get the word out about what this really means for the Cape? What does it mean for the economy of the Cape? What does it mean for the residents of the Cape? What's going to change that makes this worthwhile doing? And because of the way their funding was structured, they could not spend any money on marketing. They could only spend the money that they got to build the network.
Yep.
So we said, well, why don't we have some sort of a symposium around educating people about this? And it turned out that as we were thinking about this, the commission was thinking about a symposium around some of their regional policy plans and other things that they wanted to do. The chamber was thinking about some information that they wanted to get out. So we started putting these organizations together. And we had, what I call the original 5 families. We have the Cape Cod Chamber, the Commission, the Economic Development Council, the Tech Council, and Open Cape. We all got together, and we put together the first Smarter Cape Summit in 2011, which was centered completely around broadband opportunity and how that could change the face of the Cape. And one of the fellows from the, I forget the name of the institution, but he had said that broadband is the new railroad. And if you don't have, in the old days, if you didn't have a rail stop or the rail going through your town, you might as well kiss your town goodbye. And he says broadband is the rail of the 21st century. So we now have the rail coming through here. And, there's a lot of work to do in terms of leveraging that. But I'm sure you've heard the news that one of the things, people always ask, well, what's the benefit to me for Open Cape?
Right.
It's just for business or whatever. Well, Open Cape and CapeNet, the company that operates the Open Cape network, has made a deal with one of the major cell phone carriers to provide fiber connectivity to 51 towers on Cape Cod, which means that you're actually now going to be able to get better throughput to these towers. These towers in the past have had copper lines and T1 lines coming to them, which by today's standard are very, very slow. So this is like taking a pipe that's this big and putting a pipe this big that's in it. So all of your movies and downloads and other kinds of things that you're sending back and forth through your phone are going to actually happen much more quickly.
Excellent. Dan actually came and talked to us earlier today, so we do have his segment that people have actually viewed this morning, and he talked a little bit more about that and used a lot of different words that people didn't understand. Thanks for clarifying it in layman's terms for our viewers.
Well, I think one of the missions of the Tech Council is to help bridge the language gap of technology. You get a lot of technologists together and they all kind of slip into their own TLAs, that's 3-letter acronyms. And our job is to help people who are not technologists understand what the technology means for them. So it requires, patience, it requires understanding where other people are coming from. And, one of my favorite analogies is, Henry Ford said that if I asked people what they wanted, they would have sort of said a faster horse. So as new innovation comes along, our job is to help explain why that innovation is important and what it can mean for business and the general public here in the region.
Thanks a lot, Bert.
Thank you so much.
Cape Cod is an inspiration for innovation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Paula Hersey, and this is eSTEAMers.